let's talk self-publishing. I've already done a couple little bits and pieces about writing inspiration and where to find it. I wanted to pop in now and talk about what to do with once you have that great idea for a story. I call my process simply self-publishing because it really is simple. It boils down to right around 7 steps that I follow. Write, edit, and then eventually bring my books to print. Once you have your inspiration, I find it helpful to know what type of writer I am. You'll hear 2 different types mentioned in the writing community. One is a plotter. That is somebody who sits and methodically plots out the entirety of their novel from start to finish. They don't necessarily write it that way, but they go into the writing part of this deal knowing who their major characters are, what happens when, roughly how many pages they're going to have at the end of their drafting, and so on. They're very detailed, very meticulous. The second type are pantsers, and it's just like it sounds. They write by the seat of their pants. I'll give you a couple of guesses as to which type I am, and the first 2 don't count. But in case it wasn't obvious, yes, I am a pantser. I tell people I channel my characters. They just talk to me, and I just write what they tell me to write. And a lot of times I don't even know how a story is going to end before I start writing it. So definitely a pantser here, and it's helpful to know what type of writer you are, because as you're working on your writing schedule, as you're working on your production schedule, you need to know, based on the type of writer you are, how much time you're going to need either at the front end of that schedule or in the middle. For example, as a plotter, you need to front load your production schedule so you have time to plot out that novel before you start writing. As a pantser, doesn't really matter what's going on leading up to the start of my production, but definitely have to squeeze in some time in the middle in order to organize my mess, so to speak. Depending on the genre you're writing in or the type of book that you're writing, you're going to want to determine the word count for your draft. I go by the basic guidelines established through the NaNoWriMo community, National Novel Writing Month. And that is a decent length draft. A good first draft is 50,000 words. And in order to achieve that 50,000 word draft, the NaNoWriMo challenge is to write that 50,000 words in 30 days. And so I adopt that when I'm drafting a novel or when I'm drafting a book. My word count's going to vary. For example, like I said, for a novel, 50,000 words is a good first draft. For a novella, 35 to 40. For my brand of fiction, if I'm writing a novel, then I'm shooting for a 50,000 word draft. If I'm writing a novella, something a little shorter, then I'm shooting for 35 to 40,000 words in that first draft. Regardless of the final length, that just gives me a decent starting place, a good jumping off point. And I know that I can typically tell the whole story in that amount of words. So I'm a pantser. I'm writing a novel. That means 50,000 words. That means when I start writing, my writing goal each day, my word count goal for each day is 1,667 words. That's going to vary, so of course I want to track it to make sure I'm at least on target to get my 50,000 words in 30 days. Now, you don't need to write a first draft in 30 days. That's the Nano Challenge. It's a format that I've adopted because it keeps me from procrastinating. It keeps me from editing as I write. Your first draft is going to be messy. It's going to be one of the ugliest things you've ever put on paper or on screen. The trick with the first draft is just to get the story told. Get the words on the page. Don't worry about punctuation, grammar, spelling, plot holes. Even as a plotter, and you've got all that figured out, when you start writing, you just want to get the story told. I, again, like using the 30-day timeline because that just stops me from rooty-pooting around and taking forever to get that first draft done. So I take and recommend roughly 30 days to draft your work. Again, that's going to vary depending on what it is you're writing. But for the most part, having that tight a timeline will keep you on track, will keep you moving forward. So once the draft is done, again, because I'm a pantser, I need about 2 months to organize and then do my first edit of my novel or my book. As a plotter, you may not need that much time because you will have written in sequence. More than likely, you will have avoided a lot of the plot holes because you've already plotted that out. But just in case, you may just need 30 days or so to kind of clean up your draft and do a first edit. And the first edit, for me, all I'm doing really is putting my story into flow so that it reads coherently from start to finish. I'm going through and making sure that my characters all kept their names and genders throughout the book. I'm checking to see if there are any glaring mistakes in terms of the timeline. So I have to go back and clear up any of those kinds of inconsistencies or incongruities within my storyline. Once I've completed the edit and gotten things to where they read well, not great, but I can read through the novel and it makes some semblance of sense, then I pass it off to a beta reader. And what that is just somebody who's going to read through and ask questions, point out any plot holes. They're not going to read it and then come back with, oh my God, that's the best piece of fiction I've ever read in my life kinds of praise. The novel or the book is still in a fairly rough state at this point, even though I've done an edit, even though I've organized or whatever. Still in a fairly rough state, and that's why I have a beta reader, preferably somebody who is well versed with not only my voice but the genre that I'm writing in, because then they can tell me what doesn't work, what parts of the story took them out of it, what they liked, did they get the jokes and the references that I've made, those kinds of things. And I'll have them fill out not quite a questionnaire, but I have a set of basic questions that I want them to answer, and then they give me back the manuscript. Now, they may have also found more grammar mistakes and spelling mistakes and stuff like that, and so I ask that they highlight those as they come across them. They don't need to correct them. That's the editor's job. They don't need to correct them, but highlight, oh, you missed something here, or should this be a question mark instead of an exclamation point, or whatever. So I get all that information back, and then I do a second edit, and that's where I look at what my beta reader pointed out. I make changes as necessary, and at this point now I need an honest to goodness edit. And at this point I'm talking a copy edit. I need someone to go through and actually check my spelling, check my word usage, check the grammar, because I've now written the draft and done 2 editing passes myself. I can't see any more mistakes. I'm blind to them at this point. My brain has decided this is the story I'm trying to tell, and it's going to see that story. It's going to see those words, whether they're there or not. And so I must pass it off to a copy editor. And I want someone who is strict. I, of course, want this edit to be done by somebody who is detail-oriented, who's going to be very thorough, and is going to be ruthless with the red pen, because as a self-published author, I'm trying to compete with I'm trying to compete with traditionally published books. And that means that if you open my book and say a book written by Stephen King, I want it, as far as the quality is concerned, I want it to match that professionally done book. I want a reader not to be able to tell the difference. Now, of course, his writing style is different from mine. That's fine. Our genres are different. That's fine. But side by side, somebody looking at those 2 books should not be able to tell that mine was DIY, mine was self-produced. So the editing at this 3rd stage needs to be on point.